In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity. Welcome back to another week on the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa, here as we equip you with practical tools to live your Catholic faith in our modern world of today. And this week, I have in the flesh Deacon Harold. Welcome to Australia.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Great to have you here,
my friend.
For 2 years, you've been on the show, and it's all been via Zoom, and especially in lockdown, we went out of the studio, but it's great to be here in the flesh. Nothing beats the flesh.
Absolutely.
And we just had a great conference there with yourself and Tim Staples and Dr. Robert Haddad, and I think we're all on fire after it. So thank you very much for being with me here today on the Catholic Toolbox. And you gave a tremendous talk on racism. And it's a funny story between you and I that goes back to about a year ago, back in the Black Lives Matter.
Yes. And in fact, I write about it in the book. When I start off that section,
I got it mentioned in the book.
That's you did? Nice. No, because I shared that story to illustrate. I think it's a great way to draw people in to the issue of some of the misconceptions and, when I talked about when people are making judgments without any subjective experience or objective reality or knowledge, then we end up with prejudice types of statements. And it happened to me with you.
It was a funny story. We brought out the advertisement or the promo one day before, and I'd given it to you as well. You shared it on your social platform of just simply Black Lives Matter. Guest Deacon Harold on the Catholic Toolbox, and it sort of blew up. People thinking that you were supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, it was so funny. I remember telling you, asking you, should we remove it? Should we take it down? And not to cause scandal?
Yep, and I said no, because now people are going to have to actually listen to what I have to say.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
so we got some good views on that one.
Yeah, we did. And then people, of course, when they found out that I actually, nothing wrong with the words Black Lives Matter, but the movement itself is not good. So that's what that's what we were addressing.
Exactly.
But so the very things that I was talking about today at the conference are the same issues that was a reality for us on this show.
Exactly. And what is racism? Because I feel like today, I mean, I myself have Lebanese ancestry. You yourself were born in Barbados, and we all have some kind of an ethnic background. But it's interesting. People throw the race card all the time. You're racist. You're racist. Every time we refer to a race, it's always you're racist or you talk beautifully about prejudice, the distinction between prejudice and racism. But to put it in a nutshell, what is racism for our listeners?
And this is important for us because we're both in interracial relationships too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You're married to a beautiful Filipino woman. I'm married to a beautiful German and Irish woman. Right? So this is another thing we have in common here.
Yeah.
So the reason why I make the distinction very early in the book between prejudice and racism, because in our culture today, the terms have become conflated.
Yep.
So people, when they hear something, it's racist. You hear racist, everything's racist. I'm like, no, hold on. We have to distinguish prejudice from racism. So prejudice, the way I've defined it, is making a preconceived, having a preconceived notion or making a preconceived judgment about someone without any objective knowledge or subjective experience.
Yeah.
Okay? And so the example I used at the conference was Men at Work, right? The Australian musical group that was very popular in the States when I was younger, had a song called The Land Down Under where they talked about eating a Vegemite sandwich. Now, I had no idea what Vegemite was. I didn't know anybody from Australia. All I knew was this Australian man. So of course, I assumed everybody in Australia loves Vegemite.
And you wouldn't have had Vegemite in the United States, would
No.
you? They don't stock it.
No, we don't have
I think
it.
you have Tim Tams now at the moment.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
we saw it when my wife and I were in
Tim
New York City and during Holy Week.
Well, you can probably find Vegemite at a specialty store.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
that specialize in importing foreign types of food.
We have
You can
those
probably
here
find
that
it.
just have the American stuff.
Yes, right. So you can probably find Vegemite, but I guarantee most Americans don't even know what it is. So I made a prejudice assumption. So prejudice doesn't necessarily have to be something that's bad, but it's just I just had this assumption that people like Vegemite, even though I didn't really know what it even was. And so we all have those to some extent, right? We all have prejudice either about food or something. But the problem is when we have this prejudice toward people of color, right?
Yes.
And so racism is prejudice, as I just defined it, with the added piece that the reason I'm saying this is because I believe my race is superior to your race.
Yes.
That's racism, right? So we have to separate. So the example I give in the book, and the classic example I always give when I talk about this, is the gentleman that came up to me at the parish mission that assumed, because of the school I went to in the United States, which is University of Notre Dame, which is very, very strong academically. It's a very difficult school to get in. It's one of the elite schools in the States, but they're also famous for their American football
NFL.
team.
Yeah.
You know, they're famous for that. I mean, it goes all the way back to the 20s and 30s, how famous the school is for that. And so because I have the build of a footballer, and because many footballers are black, he came up to me and said, "Oh, you went to Notre Dame. What position did you play?" So he just assumed that I played football. When the fact is I've never played football because my high school didn't even have football. You know, and see and so people would say that was racist. That was racist.
Yeah.
No, it was prejudice statement. It was stupid and ignorant, but it wasn't racist, because in order for that statement to be racist, he would have to have meant when he said it. The reason why I said that to you is because I don't believe that people of color are smart enough to get into a school of that caliber. The only way you can get into a school like that is through athletics.
Or maybe he just purely thought you went to Notre Dame, as we say here in Australia.
Right, Notre
Dame, and you just played football. Had a white person asked him the same.
If he would ask a white person, he would say, "Oh, you went to Notre Dame. What did you study?" He would have probably had not made the assumption that they necessarily played football.
Maybe he would.
But I looked like a football player. So that's why I wasn't upset with the question, because I go, "Oh, he just looked at me and made a judgment."
Yeah.
But it wasn't racist because he didn't mean, because I know that because when he found out that I actually never played football, I got into academics. He said, "Oh," he pulled back, apologized, and pulled back, rather than if he really meant it, he would have said, "Well, you're a liar. You can't get into a school like that kind of thing." That would have been racist.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then I talked about the difference between institutional racism and people in institutions who are racist. So I talked about the church. The church herself can't be racist because it's founded by Jesus Christ. But there are people in the church who are racist.
Yeah.
Right?
It's human error. It's not the teaching of the church, which is infallible.
That's right.
It's just simply the failure of individuals.
And the people that do that aren't following what the church actually teaches.
Exactly. And we have to make the distinction there, because people fuse together what the failure of individual Catholics and even to the core church leaders. I mean, especially today, we see a lot of different problems that we could point the finger at. But really, at the end of the day, the church's teaching is infallible. It's impeccable. It is the word of God. But how we live it, how people live up to it, is a different situation.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that's what racism and prejudice is. I think you define beautifully there the distinction between those two. Now let's go in and speak about, what does the church have to say about racism? What's the history? Does it go back to the very beginning? What's the earliest documented decree, or let's say church document, or do any of the fathers speak about racism to start with, and then throughout history up to now?
So St. Paul talks about there's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. No longer Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. That kind of thing.
Yes, there we go, Saint
So,
Paul.
yeah, so he's talking about what brings us together is our faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So all the other distinctions, physical, national. So when he says there's no male or female, of course there's male and female. He's trying to make, again, remember, he's teaching like a rabbi, using hyperbole, exaggerating a point to make a point. He's not really saying there's no thing as male and female. He's saying what the differences that separate us are no longer there because it's Christ that brings us together.
Exactly.
That's what he's saying.
Not Jew nor Greek,
or slave or
black
free
person or Maronite person or Chinese.
Right, exactly. That's the point that he's making. So Christ goes back, without specifically, but love God, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he doesn't make a distinction, well, except if the person is this, except if the person is that. So Christ makes it clear we are to accept and love everyone because we're made in the image and likeness of God.
And you beautifully said in your talk here at the conference about the human race. You mentioned the human race. We're the human race first and foremostly. And then ethnicity is not something we need to be, we should be defined by, but we're sons and daughters of God. We have that divine filiation as sons and daughters of God, but we are the human race first and foremostly. And what do you think is the underlying reason why, what's the underlying cause of racism?
Yeah, well, racism is the result of original sin, adult sin. We're still dealing with the effects of original sin to this very day. So it's a manifestation of sin. It's basically what it comes down to. It's a lack of understanding. So we have people that are different than us. And some people, again, racism is something that's learned behavior.
Okay, so it's learned,
if you look anecdotally at kids on the playground, those black, white, Hispanic, Filipino, they're just playing.
They're just playing, yeah.
They don't care about, I'm not going to play with you because you're black. I mean, you don't see that, right? But over time, they begin to learn prejudices.
Yep.
They see images on television, social media, in books. They hear jokes from parents or relatives, from friends, from all these different sources. And so now they begin to think, well, maybe this is the way it is. Again, they start to develop these prejudices. And sometimes these prejudices are carried forward from our youth into our adulthood, even to our professional careers.
Yep.
So, for example, you may have a woman that works at a bank, and the bank is very clear. We do not discriminate. We look objectively at the criteria for issuing a loan to a small business. Doesn't matter. Don't even look at race, color. Just look at the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But you may have someone that works at the bank that says, I grew up thinking that black people weren't very smart, so I'm not going to make any loans to anybody that's black because they probably won't be able to pay it back. And Hold on, the banks. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So we have to make the sin. So it comes out of a sense of, and that behavior is sinful. Now it becomes mortally sinful when we get to the level of like Ku Klux Klan or hate groups, Nazi kinds of activities and things like that. Because remember, the criteria is grave matter for mortal sin, grave matter done with full knowledge and deliberate consent of the will.
Yep.
So racism would definitely fall into sin, and it could also become mortal sin if it meets that criteria as well.
Now, going back to the definition of racism, is racism the hatred or the discrimination or prejudice? Is it more to do with the hatred of a particular race?
It's thinking that my race is superior to your race. And inherent in that statement is saying you're less than me because of your race.
Indignity.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay.
In intellect and all those other things.
Could we say consequentially, we could say that British culture was more advanced in technology than that of the indigenous
Correct.
lands that they colonized. So we could say there's that superiority
in technology, not in the nature of the human being, though.
Could we say that it's superior in terms of the culture? Their culture is...
Well, who's to say that an industrialized nation is better than an Aboriginal culture here in Australia? because they don't have tech. What if they did this? Aliens come from outer space.
Yeah,
they have
exactly.
technology.
That's right.
You guys are just some primitive little Earthlings, because all you can do is build a space station and go to the moon. You know, we transverse, you know, across the galaxy.
Exactly.
You know, you guys are just we don't. No one wants to be labeled. Does that make me less of a human being? Mm-hmm. Does that make my culture less because we don't have the technology that you have? No,
Absolutely.
how does that make me less of a person?
So racism can go into obviously the dignity. That's definitely the case. That, you know, that's what led to slavery.
Yes.
That these people are objects. They're not humans. They don't have the same dignity. We have a hatred and discrimination for their dignity. And also racism can extend to the fact that one culture might be more technologically advanced than the other, and you discriminate against them because they're not the same. Now, we could say there's a more positive element of a Christian culture because we do have the fullness of truth, and we might bring that to another culture that's pagan. Could we say that, you know, our culture is better in the sense?
No, you can't.
It's not
you can't
better.
say that it's better. It's different.
Yeah.
See, it's different. For example, in the book, one of the things I do is I talk about one of my favorite musicians of all time is Eddie Van Halen, the guitar player. And so I remember watching, because after he died, you know, I was just like, oh, I want to find out more about him. So there was something I found on YouTube. It was like an American Heritage Foundation or something. We're talking about immigrants who have made an impact on American life and culture, and obviously one of the greatest guitar players of all time. So he was talking about when he came to this country, because he's Dutch, they didn't speak any English. So when they came to American schools, the people used to make fun of them and you know, take their homework and rip it up and take their lunch and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, he said the only kids that would even associate them were the black kids.
Okay.
So they were thrown into the same category as the black kids, because there was segregation back there at the time. And so he said his first friends were black kids. You see, so it's not just an issue of color. It also can extend to nationality and even religion. Yeah. Like, oh, you Maronites, man, what kind of liturgy is that? Our liturgy is better than that Maronite liturgy. Or you know, the Latin Rite Mass is far superior than to the ordinary form of the Mass. And, you know, we can get into this. Now, Eric,
we're better than you.
Yeah, we're better than you.
Because we have a different liturgy. Now, you could say, look, this liturgy is done more reverently, or
yes,
from
it's one liturgy.
But we can't say we're better than people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we can't say. I think it's that fine balance that we really have to weigh up and really find that fine balance. But what's the spiritual danger of racism?
Yeah, I think the big spiritual danger of racism is what all sin does. It starts to destroy God's life in you. Yeah. Right. When I see you, George, I don't want to see Lebanese. I want to see George. I don't want to see Australian. I want to see white. I want to see George. You know, and that's the way I should be looking at you and relating to you and speaking with you, which I do. Yeah. You know, but so we can't let those kinds of things be a barrier, because that builds up walls of division within us. Exactly. You know, and what we need to do is break down those walls of division and start to see each other through the eyes of Christ.
So it threatens creation. It threatens our respect for God's creation. Because if we're the human race and we're discriminating against someone on that basis, then the problem is that we're disrespecting God, that He indeed did create everybody, that regardless of the different ethnic compositions. We're disrespecting God, the dignity that God gave to humankind. Essentially, we're spitting back in the face of God and saying, "Oh well, these people are less because they're not like me, or they're not as advanced as our society, or they're for any other reason."
And we also have to be careful about labeling. Like, for example, I'm a Lebanese Catholic. I'm this kind of Catholic. Exactly. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with that. Like, people say I'm a black Catholic. But when I think about it, I think I'm a Catholic who's black. Yeah. Because, like I said, when I stand before Jesus Christ to be judged, He's not going to ask me how black I am. He's going to say, did you follow me? You know, I gave you talents, right? I gave you the gift of diaconate. I gave you the gift of fatherhood. And I gave you the gift of being a husband. did you honor me in those talents that I gave you? He's
Yeah.
not going to. Now, that doesn't mean I deny my ethnicity. I love my Caribbean culture. I love
Of
our
course.
food. I speak
Of
our
course.
dialect. I love our music. So, but that doesn't define who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Being a loyal son of the living God
Yes.
and a follower of Jesus Christ defines who I am.
Exactly.
You know, and not saying that my ethnicity is not important, but that doesn't determine who I am. The problem is we live in a culture today where we're allowing political affiliation, ethnicity, gender to define who I am, and not Jesus Christ and God being made in His image and likeness. What we're trying to do is to make the culture's trying to make God in its own image and likeness. That's the problem.
And let's go into that a little bit, because I think we understand very clearly that racism is wrong and prejudice is wrong on a dignity level, on a consequential level, depending on cultures. I think that's clear. But I think where we can have, and the church has been pretty good today. I mean, there's been problems in the past where some American bishops and clergy did participate in slavery.
Yes, that's correct.
I think we're past that on a social level in most places in the world, hopefully. But the problem I see in the church sometimes is that we can have that segregation within the church. Your Maronites,
Yes.
your Chaldeans, your Eastern Catholics, we're Latin Mass Catholics, where we can divide the church into our spirituality or rite or church that we belong to. And then, I mean, it's funny because I went to an Eastern Catholic school, and I'll tell you this story. It was the feast of Saint Maroon, the founder of the Maronites, and then the priest was giving a homily on the Universal Church and how the Maronites are part of the Universal Church. And one girl woke up, I think she was sleeping during the homily. Oh, are we Catholic? And the whole church burst into laughter. But that's an example there that sometimes in different communities within the church, different Eastern rites or spiritualities in the West, we can segregate or become a ghetto.
Yeah.
And that is to the detriment of our ultimate cause, which is to save souls.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, in different Catholic organizations, I've experienced certain people might take over or control it, and then it becomes a club, it might become, an Asian club or a Filipino club or a Lebanese club. And there's that affiliation there with that group that's trying to evangelize and bring people there, but it's characterized based on that ethnicity or culture. As Dr. Robert Haddad said, apologetics is not a Lebanese thing.
Yeah,
Right. It's things like this that really irk me and make me angry, because we shouldn't be. It's beautiful to share the different ethnic, our different heritage, bring our heritage to the table, or our spirituality, so all can experience it beautifully. But I think where we cross the line, it becomes all about being whatever our spirituality is, or if you're a lay Franciscan or a Dominican, it becomes all about that. Then that's and to the exclusion of focusing on uniting together and just getting to the point, putting our spiritualities to the side and getting to the point of saving souls, evangelizing, being effective in whatever organization. I thought I'd bring that up because I think that's the problem where that racism or that division exists today.
Yeah,
that's a challenge for us.
We even see it in parishes. If
Exactly.
you have a Hispanic group or a Vietnamese group or a Filipino group, and say they have a mass in their language, and so there's a tendency to say sometimes, well, that's their mass.
Yeah.
That's their mass.
Exactly.
Well, it's all our mass. But so and the reason they have it in their language is because they're trying to preserve their culture.
Exactly, yeah.
See?
Or
So
they may be able to
they're not
intellectually
saying, well, you can't come to
participate.
this mass. This is only for Hispanics, or this is only for Vietnamese. You can't come. They're not saying that. But sometimes we don't want to go there. I don't know what they're saying. I mean, my mass is 10 o'clock, and that's.
I think
I'm not gonna go
Latin
to that
might make
mass.
it easier
Yeah.
to unite everybody.
Well, we're the same thing with the Latin mass. Well, that's just like we do with the ethnicities. We do. Well, that's the Latin mass. I don't understand Latin anyway, so I'm not going to go to that. Just like I'm not going to Hispanic mass. So we have to be careful. I think what we need to do is open ourselves to different experiences. Go to one of those ethnic masses. Go to the Latin rite mass. Go and try to understand.
Go to the Eastern rites.
Yeah, exactly. If you're just, I'm just going to go to English and Latin mass. No. Go to the Eastern Rite.
Go to the Maronite Rite, go to the
Exactly.
Byzantine Rite, the Armenian Rite, experience, or even the Anglican Ordinariate, which is in the
Exactly.
West, beautiful liturgy, and the Latin Mass, traditional Latin Mass, if you don't already go to there. I think that's the best way to sort of broaden our horizons.
Yeah, and we begin to break down those barriers because now we're entering into someone's experience. Now we're saying, you're not just over there with your liturgy. I actually care about, what I just want to enter your experience. So I want to be able to see you the way God sees you.
And this
I
is
want to
part
break
of the
down
universal church.
walls of prejudice within myself because so I'm entering into your experience.
You know what, Deacon? I just had a thought. The antidote to racism is the Catholic faith.
Yeah, that's my point. That's my book about.
Catholicos, universal church.
Exactly. I think the Catholic Church has a tremendous opportunity now to take the lead in an important issue in the life of our culture today. Because we often don't, let's be real, marriage, gender, we don't really speak out very much. We don't preach on it very much. And then when a law is passed, people get upset and they get angry. And then bishops issue statements, but it's too late at that point. But when it comes to this issue, we can actually take the lead and have people, for once, they turn around and say, look what the Catholic Church is doing. Man, that's a great path. Let's follow that.
Exactly.
And I think we
the
have
salvation of souls. I mean, that's our mission. That's when you think about it and you focus on that. And sure, you might go to a Maronite liturgy, a traditional Latin Mass. You might have a different spiritual ethnicity or whatever tradition. But at the end of the day, we should all be able to put aside whatever rite we practice or everything and come to the table and save souls. I mean, that's what makes us Catholic. And I think the reality is that our aspiration for salvation is what unites us, really, as our first and foremost.
Yeah, wanting heaven for the other person, even if they're a different color or a different race.
Exactly.
But we have to care about that. One of the things I recommended was having study groups in the parish where you're going through some of the amazing documents of the church on this issue of race that can bring people together, but getting people to care enough. Because, I mean, think about it. You don't wake up every morning like, oh, I got to go to work today. Where's my coffee? And boy, I think I'm going to really break down the walls of racial barriers today. I mean, it's not something that you wake up thinking about every day because you have your own life, your own struggles, your own spirituality, your own things you're dealing with. And so you have to do the work of caring enough to even begin to have those conversations and to work toward that. Because it takes work, It's
a waste of time, racism, really, especially for us as Catholics or even focusing on it. Because we have a job to do, save souls, or make in the image and likeness of God. We need to get to heaven. We're here to save souls. Whether you're black or white, whatever ethnicity you are, we have to band together and save souls. I mean, that's the focus. We can't waste time. I think it's really of the devil. It's a serious waste of time, especially for Catholics. Look, people may have prejudices.
We all do to some extent or another. We all do.
Yeah. This person might be Chinese. They might be...
Well, I mean, you see someone that's Asian and you think, oh, yeah, they're smart at math and play violin when they're 3 years old or something. I mean, where does that come from? It comes from learning and conditioning over all these different things.
It's a learned behavior.
Which is not true because, just because someone is a certain thing doesn't mean it meets the characteristics that you saw on television. We have to look at people individually and get to know that person. That's why, I'm looking at your beautiful wife right now. I don't want to see Filipino. Although I love Filipino food. I've been to the Philippines 4 times. I love the culture. I really do. In fact, the best reception I've ever had in the world, the largest audiences I've ever spoken to. I'm talking about thousands of people, 6,000 people one day, and then 27,000 people at the Mall of Asia Arena. I got on my phone. I show you the video. At the Mall of Asia Arena, 27,000 people. And it was the most amazing experience.
While they're shopping.
And to be received as a Catholic was beautiful, but also to be black. And to know that those people want to hear what I have to say, as a Catholic who's black, right? So, they're hearing what I have to say because they're not coming to see a black Catholic. They're hearing to someone who's on fire and in love with Jesus Christ, who wants to be inspired to follow Jesus with all their heart and their soul and their mind and their strength. The fact that I'm black, for me, is icing on the cake.
Now, here's a question. Here's a question for us. We're in a society in the West. We're all attempting... Here in Australia, we're trying to raise the Indigenous voice to a larger extent. We're always trying to include cultures and make up for let's say, the lack of, Asian people in certain things, or Middle Eastern people, any people of an ethnicity, should we as Catholics participate in that and say, well, we want to include women or more black Catholics in this arena, or more, or should organizations within the church participate in that, making up for that? Or should we just encourage everybody to participate and take leadership roles in the church, or academia or anything else within the church? What approach should we take? Should we?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, we have to be careful not to adapt societies or cultural ways of dealing with this issue.
Yeah.
You know, we have to follow the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what I think.
Yeah.
What made leaders in this area like Martin Luther King or Gandhi. You know, I watched Gandhi on the flight on the way over here, which is, I mean, like almost 4 hours long, that movie. But they wanted to, you know, fight back. He said, no, we must be peaceful. You know, so we have to be countercultural. Mm-hmm. You know, Martin Luther King, same thing, countercultural. Jesus, countercultural. Jesus told the truth, they killed him. Mm-hmm. You know, so we have to be leery about adopting cultural standards and cultural ideas for how to deal with these things. The second thing is we should deal with people based on their merit. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you have a job opening and you have, in the parish, you have an Asian person, a black person, a white person. You know, the first thing you should not think, well, I'm going to hire the white person because obviously they're more qualified. You haven't even looked at it on the paper and see who's what. You should hire the person who's best fits the job and best fits.
We shouldn't say, let's say black people have been oppressed and maybe a black person could do with this job better than this white person that may. We shouldn't be thinking like
and
that.
And we should be actually encouraging people of color to apply.
Yeah.
You know,
we should be participating in encouraging people of color to apply.
Absolutely.
But equally not saying that white people shouldn't apply. It's about getting that balance. It shouldn't be, everybody should be applying.
I'm looking for a black person to fill this position. No, you're looking for a qualified person to fill that position.
And encourage
if they're black,
everybody
to
apply.
And if they're black,
and if we see that people of color are typically not applying in that situation to that job, we should encourage them, hey, apply.
Yes.
If it's all, let's say, a particular people, we're only seeing... I mean, you don't want to discriminate. I'm really trying to articulate correctly. If you see that a lot of women, for example, are not applying to this job, encourage women where there's a lack of deficiency. But really, we got to regulate it back to, hey, everyone's welcome to apply. We're here to find the best. We want to encourage everybody to apply. And we want to find the person of best merit. And to give everyone that equal opportunity, they need to apply. We're not just going to give it to them because they're a minority. I know we're trying to increase women in government, but we should be encourage women to apply. And everybody else to apply to run for offices. And eventually they get in. And we find that. I think it's doing that in a natural way, not trying to force it. That you see often there and then. But let's go into 3 practical tools. In person, some very practical tools. How can we fight racism as Catholics within the church and in society? Because we don't want it to plague within the walls of the church. To preserve that unity and outside in society. What should we do, whether we're someone of color or not? How should we fight it? What are some 3
I think the number
tools?
one thing is to see the image and likeness of God in the person standing in front of you. That's key.
Yeah.
When you can look at a person and not see, because sometimes you look at someone of a different race or different ethnicity or even different religious expression, right? You said Maronite. So you have to stop with the preconceived notions and just deal with the person who's standing in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is absolutely key to even begin to remove walls of prejudice. Yeah. You know, because now we're not using. Again, if prejudice and racism is learned behavior, we can unlearn it. I really believe that we can unlearn it, but it starts with seeing the image and likeness of God in the person standing in front of you. So, and sometimes that may involve conversations. You know, I talk about how if someone came up to me, you know, Deacon Harold, for some reason, whenever I'm around someone that's black or someone that's Hispanic, I get scared. Or I think certain things. I'm like,
that's a common thing.
I don't even know that person. Why am I thinking this is so stupid? Can we talk about that? Now that may be a difficult conversation to have, but it's honest, and you're really trying to work through
Yep.
things that you're recognizing in yourself that are deficient, that's problematic, and let's work through it together. You know,
That's right.
and to have those conversations.
That's a sensible approach.
Yeah.
A really sensible approach to looking at it that way. That, you know, most people do have stereotypes. Oh, you're an Arab.
Yeah.
They might have preconceptions about what they've watched on TV, and we've been conditioned a lot by the media. Or this person's black, and we should think a certain way about certain people. This person's white. You know, they must be treated differently. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so that would be one for sure. I think the second thing is appreciate the great gifts of cultural diversity we all bring to the table as Catholics. So one of the things I talked about at the conference was putting images up of different saints in the church that are different color.
Exactly.
You know, different.
Exactly.
So just because your church, you know, you don't have many people of color in your church, that doesn't mean you can't put up pictures of Josephine Bakhita or
Saint
Juan
Augustine.
Diego, Saint Augustine. You know,
I think often he's portrayed
Our Lady
as,
of Lavang, and all, you know, different, you know.
He's portrayed, I think, Saint Augustine in a lot of the photos, not portrayed to be. He would have been a darker individual.
Yeah, he's African.
He's
yeah.
African, so I think. I mean, Jesus would have looked Middle Eastern as well.
That's right, right. I mean, we see
It's
these
art,
images of
so,
Jesus,
yeah.
and then some people get offended. Like Our Lady of Lavang in our parish, she has Vietnamese features because when she appeared in Guadalupe, she had Mexican figures. When she appeared in Vietnam, she had Vietnamese features. Oh, that's not really Mary. Mary looked like a European person from France. No, she didn't. She was a Middle Eastern. I mean, she's a Palestinian Jew.
Yeah,
have you ever been to
exactly.
Palestine? Have you seen what Palestinian Jews look like?
Exactly.
They ain't white. You know, they're not European. You know, but see, and the thing is, in the end, George, there's no physical description of Jesus in the Gospel at all because it didn't matter what he looked like.
It didn't matter. Yeah.
It didn't matter. The teaching is what mattered. You know, so we have to break down the barrier. Again, not saying that we don't appreciate people's gifts of diversity that they bring, but we don't let those define who we are. But to have those in the church, I mean, we talk about learned behavior. Imagine a little child walking into a church and seeing the beautiful diversity.
Yes,
seeing
that's
Saint
correct.
Maroon. Who is that? Why is he wearing that funny thing on his head? You know? Well, he was a monk. Yeah, but I know the monks at Dominicans, they don't look like that. Well, he's Eastern. I mean, see, so they're learning to appreciate the richness of other
That's
see,
right.
and these are
That's
saints
right.
in the Catholic Church.
That's right.
Saint Maron is a saint in the Catholic Church.
Exactly.
He's Maron. He's a Maronite. He's founded the Maronites. And Saint Charbel. Saint Charbel has probably more miracles attributed to him than than many other saints. And a lot of people don't even know who he is.
Exactly.
They don't know who
Many
he
people
is.
do. Many people don't.
That's what I'm saying. So we need to expand our knowledge.
And the other Byzantine saints, you know, for the Byzantine
sure.
Catholic churches, and you have there was a great when I was in Rome. I think one of the last statues around the Vatican was an Armenian saint. You know, there's just such a diversity. Catholicism, by being Catholic and embracing the fullness of the church in both lungs, as a result of that, you should become more cultured or more multicultural. I think as a result of that, because you see that race is put to the side, color, gender, and we are sons and daughters of God. We have all a goal to get to heaven, and we're all created by God. Who cares if you're black? Who cares if you're Middle Eastern or Asian or whatever you are? It doesn't matter. Should it cross people's minds? Now, here's something that I think we battled in Australia, the racism. There's still racism out there, but I think comedy actually contributed to fighting racism and cutting out those stereotypes. What do you think of... in the United States, there's lots of great comedians. And me and my wife watch them.
So I remember watching, they used to have these Hollywood roasts. Where they would roast famous, and the jokes they told, oh my goodness, they were talking about off-color jokes and but it was funny because they weren't serious.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they were playing up all these stereotypes, all these racist stereotypes, but it was done out of good humor.
Do you think that's what we need? Stereotypes can be killed with humor.
Yeah,
so that way you're not offending people, but it's teaches us the balance. I think that's how a lot of people in Australia overcame racism. They went to school with Arabs, they went to school with black people, Asian people, and everyone just lightly made fun of it, bantered with each other, and then they grew out of these stereotypes. I think that could be a positive tool, maybe. To use.
I think I agree with you, but we live in a world that's so politically correct right now.
Exactly, that's
that
the problem.
Everybody and their mother is going to be offended.
Exactly.
But it's so stupid though. We can't even laugh at each other or about each other now because then we're going to offend someone. It's absolutely ridiculous, you know. But I think humor can be a way of beginning to recognize stereotypes and then beginning to break those down.
Yeah.
So why was that? You know, you tell a joke. Why was that joke funny? You laugh at it because it is funny, but then it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of not true. You know, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So you get into it, and maybe the humor could be a way to open up the discussions that we were talking about before.
I think so. Yeah, on a social level, I think that could be a practical thing. But let's go into practical tool number 3.
Yeah. So number 3, I think would be prayer and fasting. So you know, praying to help recognize your own prejudices, and then once you do recognize, well, how do I get rid of? Besides the dialogue, right? It's the fasting. You know, because we are horrible at fasting as Catholics. You know?
In the West, at least.
I mean, obviously monks and nuns that are employed. I mean, fasting is just a normal part of their everyday lived experience. Yeah. But for us, I mean, for example, in Lent, we have one fasting day. That's Ash Wednesday.
That's right. That's right.
You know,
in the West.
In the West. You know, so we could do more there. You know, with regard to fasting, and not just fasting from food, but fasting is something we enjoy, and offer that, you know, what we feel is missing, that hunger, that thirst, that desire for that thing that I'm missing, and unite, because our real hunger and desire and thirst for it is a deepened relationship with God.
Exactly.
So to unite that fast with our prayer, powerful combination. Even Jesus tells us, right? Remember, they said that some demons can only be cast out by prayer and fasting, and maybe the demon of racism and prejudice can only be cast out by prayer and fasting. Exactly.
And mate, they're just 3 powerful tools. I think you can take action today very, very clearly with these 3 practical tools, and we can take action. We can really start to heal those prejudices. If you're in a parish, if you're in a group or you're running a particular group, what you can do is take action. Cause a Tower of Babylon situation. Let's describe that. Get all cultures to mix with each other. I actually suggested, when I was on the parish council in my cathedral, I actually suggested, you know, a parish food day. I think it's good that all cultures should be able to share food, and that's what you do at your parish.
Yes. And the food, like I said, you know, and this goes back to our point about ethnicity. So the ethnicity of the various cultures in the parish, you come together around the food. Yeah. But the goal is like you said, to save souls, to have a deeper understanding that we are all part of one family of God.
We're all Catholics.
But it's those different, beautiful ways that we express our ethnicity and our culture. But when we come together, what's uniting us really is that relationship with Jesus Christ and followers.
And it should amaze us that the gospel can reach different ethnicities, yet be the same. There's that diversity, but there's that unity. That's what just amazes me.
Well, that's the Trinity.
Exactly.
You know, there's 3, but they're one.
Yeah. You know? I mean, and the beautiful thing, especially about Latin, as the universal language of the church, and it unites everybody. A soldier who was fighting in the Vietnam War, for example, at the time, and or before in any world wars, would go overseas and anywhere, and then it could be a Chinese priest who turned around and said, Dominus vobiscum.
Yeah.
You know, and then he goes home to his hometown. It's the same priest, Dominus vobiscum. It's having that universal language also, you know, is a beautiful thing. But regardless of that, we're all here to save our souls and get to heaven. We're the church militant. And I want to talk about your book that's coming up next year about racism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Building a Civilization of Love, a Catholic Response to Racism. And I wrote that book during the pandemic because, again, I was home, like, what do I do now? So I wrote 2 books. But this book is, like I said, I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm very excited about it. You what's interesting, this book is being published by Ignatius Press,
Excellent.
big Catholic publisher.
Yes.
But how I knew this book was important, I mean, I felt that I had something to say that was worthwhile in the book. And when I submitted it, I received an email from the publisher himself, Mark Brumley, and Father Fessio, who's the founder
Yes.
of Ignatius Press.
Yeah,
and they
Father
told me
Fessio.
that they were going to go through the book themselves. They do the edits themselves. I was like,
Not just
whoa.
simple editors.
Yeah, because
they're going to personally look at it.
They did. They personally went through the book and made some suggestions of how I could say things differently. Because as a theologian, sometimes in my head, I'm saying, "Oh, people understand this," and sometimes they can't understand. So it takes that, and that's how I think the editing process is so important. Because you have another set of eyes.
You have
looking at what you're
independent
saying.
people looking at it from each angle, but not trying to lose that message there.
Right.
Just cleaning
And so
it up.
I was honored, actually, really honored that the men of that caliber would want to go through and help me, smooth out some of the
because
things
I
I'm
don't
saying
think
in the
anyone
book.
has actually written or addressed within the church. No one has actually addressed racism the way you have at the moment.
So there
as a
are
Black
books
American.
out. There are books out there about dealing with racism, but
Not the current problems like Black Lives Matter, critical race theory,
Right.
everything else that goes back to
Dr.
Karl
Ed
Marx.
Fazer actually just
Enlightenment.
released a book on critical race theory and racism.
Yeah.
So in my book, critical race theory and those things, they're just a chapter in the book, but his whole book is about critical race theory.
Okay.
It's very, very well done.
Excellent.
So I would say if people want to find out more about that, don't wait for my book. Get Dr. Ed Fazer's book.
So I think
It
something
just came
great
out.
came out of our little problem that we had with the promo up
Yes,
on my show of
that's
Black
right.
Lives Matter. I think a new book was born.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, I started to see that in the racial issues in our country.
Yeah.
And I even hear a lady talk to me at length today about the Aboriginal issues and indigenous folks there and some of the tensions that are still happening. So I think the book is timely, not just for the United States, but for Australia and other countries as well that are still dealing with this issue.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with me here,
Yeah,
Deacon, in
George,
person.
great
It's
to be
great
with
to
you
have
in
you here in
person.
Sydney.
Absolutely. I'm
And
honored
we'll
to be here.
continue to collaborate and work together more closely.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
that's what I hope we'll do for the future, and how we can work together more closely, the Catholic Toolbox and you yourself as dynamic deacon. And we're proud to have you as a partner, and you've been a personal inspiration to me, and
thank
it's
you.
great to have you here in person.
Thank you, George. Appreciate
you
it
very
very
much.
much. Honored to be with you today.
Yes, and don't forget to tune in to the Catholic Toolbox by going into thecatholictoolboxshow.com. That is thecatholictoolboxshow.com, or you can subscribe on any podcast platform wherever you get your podcast from. So, thank you for tuning in to the Catholic Toolbox, the art of practical Catholicism. I'm your host and founder, George Manassa. Until next week, God bless, take care, and take action. In this era of grave spiritual crisis, it is not enough to simply know about your Catholic faith. That is why we need a Catholic toolbox to equip us with the practical skills necessary to live our Catholic faith to reach our ultimate goal, which is heaven for all eternity. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for the Catholic Toolbox as we hand you the tools to go forth, live the faith, and change our modern world today. Live on the Voice of Charity.